All right, the Strategic Archive for Saturday, February 28th, 2026, must now record the first hours of what is being internally termed as the weekend of total silence, as the Western financial grid remains in a state of indefinite suspension. While the official press releases from the G7 Treasury departments are preaching patience and resilience, the raw intelligence from the primary logistics hubs proves that a massive, coordinated seizure of all remaining physical collateral is currently underway. John CC is the archive where we look past the frozen digital tickers and track the actual movement of the world's tangible wealth. Today's data confirms that the paper era did not just end, it was effectively nationalized and replaced by a military-grade resource standard in the dark of night. The silver market has completely vanished from the retail and commercial tiers, with every major online dealer and physical storefront now displaying a government acquisition notice. We are receiving verified reports from the shadow markets in Singapore, where the Saturday morning physical premium has crossed an unthinkable $65 per ounce, as the global industrial giants attempt to bypass the banking holiday to secure the raw materials for their survival. This is no longer about investment or speculation. This is a state of total industrial warfare where silver has become the most sought-after element on the periodic table. The math of the 2026 reset has reached its terminal conclusion. The paper derivative was a weapon of mass deception, and that weapon has finally run out of ammunition. Gold has reached a reported shadow price of $4,200 in the decentralized private settlement nodes that are currently operating outside of the suspended Western grid. Internal ledger data from the BRICS unit system proves that the final transition to a resource-backed settlement layer was activated at midnight GMT, effectively leaving the dollar and the euro as stranded assets in the international community. We are seeing a historic reversal where the nations that once exported their gold to the West are now using their sovereign fleets to repatriate every remaining bar before the new monetary standard is officially unveiled. The archives of this Saturday will document the largest movement of physical wealth in human history, occurring under the cover of a global communication blackout. Inventory data from the primary transport nodes confirms that the registered silver at the COMEX has been physically removed from the warehouses and relocated to undisclosed high-security facilities under military escort. This is the ultimate force majeure event, a quiet acknowledgement that the private claims on that metal have been officially voided to protect the strategic interests of the state. If you were holding paper contracts or unallocated silver accounts, the John CC data suggests you are now holding a legacy debt to a system that has no physical way of fulfilling its promises. The only wealth that retains its integrity this morning is the weight of the metal that is currently sitting in the direct physical possession of the sovereign individual. ATM networks remain offline across North America and Europe, with the maintenance excuse now being replaced by a formal national liquidity emergency decree. Our archive has tracked the internal flows of the central bank ledgers, and it is now clear that the digital fiat reserves have been completely consumed by the collapse of the multi-trillion-dollar derivative chains. The digital numbers in your banking app are now nothing more than pixels on a screen, disconnected from the reality of purchasing power until the reset is finalized. This is why our mission has focused so intensely on the vault drains. The physical movement of silver and gold was the only data point that accurately predicted the total lockout of the digital masses. The industrial reality of this final weekend is one of total paralysis for the high-tech and defense sectors, as the physical shortage of silver for circuit-level manufacturing has reached a critical breaking point. We are seeing reports of entire assembly lines in the Silicon Forest being mothballed as the just-in-time supply chain for precious metals has been replaced by a state-prioritized distribution model. The paper traders in New York treated resources as infinite, but the reality of 2026 has proven that the digital world is a fragile guest of the physical world. Without the metal, the AI revolution stops, and without the metal, the Western industrial complex has no path forward in the new economic reality. Capital flight has transformed into a physical exodus, as the elite utilize private aviation and high-speed sea lanes to move their wealth into neutral jurisdictions that are not participating in the Western bank holiday. The data proves that while the public is being told to stay calm and wait for the digital grid to return, the insiders are liquidating every paper asset they own to acquire whatever physical silver and gold remains in the private vaults of the East. The John CC archive is documenting this divergence in real time, showing that the decoupling of the world has created a permanent barrier between those who trust the screen and those who own the weight. The exit doors were not just locked, they were strategically redirected to the vaults of the resource-holding nations. Options and futures for the precious metals mining industry have been officially declared non-transferable under emergency orders, effectively trapping every retail investor in a losing trade, while the bullion banks are given the time to reorganize their balance sheets. This is the definition of a systemic bail-in, where the private losses are used to provide a temporary floor for the failing institutions of the old world. When the system can no longer lie about the inventory, it stops the market, And that is exactly what the Friday close and Saturday silence represent. The math of the 2026 collapse is a brutal lesson in counterparty risk. If the asset is not in your hands, it is currently being used to save someone who doesn't even know your name. Geopolitical reporting confirms that the BRICS nations have officially issued their final gold for oil directive, meaning that from Monday morning, no energy exports from the primary producing regions will be settled in unbacked currency units. This is the formal death of the petrodollar, an event that the archives have been tracking through the systematic accumulation of metal by Eastern central banks over the last decade. The domestic purchasing power of the dollar is now a falling knife, as the world's most essential commodities are no longer priced in the currency of the West. The John C.C. Archive is recording the final hours of a global empire that was built on debt and is now being dismantled by the reality of the physical vault. The shadow banking sector is currently being cleared by administrative decree, as the collateral chains that supported the silver shorts are being surgically removed from the financial architecture. Every paper claim is being assigned a terminal value that represents pennies on the dollar, while the physical metal is being revalued into the thousands of percent. This is the singularity of the 2026 reset, where the infinite digital expansion finally hits the finite wall of the physical world. The vaults are officially empty of paper promises and are now being filled with the reality of a new physical standard that will define the next 100 years of economic history. We are seeing a total blackout of these statistics on all centralized social media platforms, as the Economic Stability Act is being used to prevent the spread of warehouse inventory data to the general public. However, the John C.C. Archive is being updated through decentralized satellite nodes and peer-to-peer networks to ensure that the record of this transition remains accessible to the sovereign individual. The rate of currency devaluation is now accelerating beyond the ability of the retail sector to adjust their pricing models, leading to a state of total economic disorientation in the streets. If you are waiting for the mainstream media to tell you that the system has failed, you are ignoring the data that is already visible in every closed ATM and every vacant gold shop. The psychological warfare being deployed this Saturday is focused on the promise of a new social credit digital unit that will restore order and liquidity to the population by Monday morning. This is the final trap of the central planners, designed to convert the remaining wealth of the masses into a programmable surveillance tool that can be frozen at the touch of a button. Sovereignty requires the ability to see through this reset and ensure that your family's future is anchored in the physical world where no central bank can revalue your history. The archives of 2026 will be the primary source for understanding how the global population was managed during the transition from the era of infinite paper to the era of finite resource control. The 150-day moving average has effectively become a historical artifact, as the price of silver and gold has moved into a vertical trajectory that no longer respects the laws of technical analysis. There is no longer a chart because there is no longer a price in the traditional sense. There is only the cost of survival in a world where the old ledger has been burnt. This is the great decoupling, where the physical assets have finally broken free from the digital gravity of the paper short sellers. The data shows that the demand for physical metal at the sovereign level is already 100 times higher than the total available supply, creating a vacuum that will consume the value of every other legacy asset class. We are entering the final hours of the weekend blackout, where the world will wait in silence to see the new form of the global monetary standard. The reports from the private security industry indicate that the primary vaults in the G7 are being harmonized under a unified military command to back the new emergency digital settlement units. The door to secure your own wealth has not just closed, it has been barricaded by the total power of the state to preserve its own existence. Scarcity is the only law that matters on this Saturday morning, and those who did not stay physical are now facing a reality where their digital life savings have no functional role in the new resource-based economy. The synergy between the total energy blackout and the financial freeze is creating a state of nature for the Western financial markets. As the cost of maintaining the digital grid exceeds the actual value of the debt it carries, the system is naturally defaulting to the physical standard of the vaults. The John C.C. Archive has consistently shown that you cannot build a digital empire on a foundation of paper lies, and today that foundation has officially collapsed. We are recording the final data points of the paper regime so that the sovereign individuals of the future can understand the mathematical inevitability of the collapse and the absolute necessity of staying sovereign through the possession of physical resources. Stay physical, stay sovereign, and stay tuned to the John C.C. Archive, because the events of the next 48 hours will define the economic destiny of the human race for the next century. The global market has reset, the paper mask has been torn away, and the physical truth is finally taking its throne in the halls of power and the vaults of the sovereign. Thank you for watching, and remember to always verify the raw warehouse data before you trust the scripted promises of a bankrupt administration. The clock has struck midnight for the old world, and Saturday, February 28, 2026, is the day the ledger was finally settled in the weight of real physical metal. The final Saturday update confirms that the BIS in Basel has officially issued a global force majeure for all cross-border derivatives, effectively ending the era of the global banking interconnectedness as we knew it. Every nation is now effectively an island of debt, forced to rely on whatever physical gold and silver it has managed to secure within its own borders before the lockdown. We are seeing the total fragmentation of the global trade system, where only nations with a positive balance of resources are able to participate in the new economy. The data proves that the era of globalism was a debt-fueled hallucination that has finally been corrected by the reality of the vaults. Intellectual honesty requires us to record that the coming Sunday will likely see a controlled communication outage as the government attempts to regain control of the economic narrative before Monday's unveiling. If your digital devices stop functioning, remember that the physical truth of your assets remains unchanged by the status of the network or the silence of the state. The trend of the 2026 reset is mathematically locked, and no amount of censorship can bring back the silver and gold that has already left the Western exchanges. The time for speculation is officially over. The time for direct physical ownership is all that remains for those who wish to survive the transition. The 150 exponential moving average has been replaced by a vertical spike that represents the final short squeeze of the global banking architecture. The banks that sold what they did not have are now being systematically liquidated, and their assets are being absorbed by the sovereign entities that respect the laws of physical scarcity. The data proves that the world has moved beyond the point of hedging and into a state of total revaluation, where the possession of physical resources is the only metric that defines purchasing power in the new era. Monday morning will not be an opening, it will be a revelation of the new physical reality of the world. In a world of total digital deception and central bank manipulation, the raw, verifiable movement of physical silver and gold is the only beacon of truth that cannot be extinguished. The Monday warning was the alert, the Thursday force majeure was the signal, and the Saturday weekend blackout is the reality of the end. The Strategic Archive has captured every moment of this historic transition, and we will continue to provide the data of the new physical standard as the world rebuilds from the ruins of the paper era. Stay physical, stay sovereign, and watch the John CC Archive as we navigate the first hours of the new economic world.